Hey y'all, welcome to my lesson for Country Dance by Ferdinando Carulli. This is a pretty old piece which is probably public domain at this point, but my copy comes from Classical Guitar for Young People by Matthew Hensley. And this is a great solo if you're starting to get into some of these more complex right hand patterns like arpeggios, scales, stuff like that. And this one has this pattern right from the beginning that we'll talk about. First of all, let me say that this piece is divided into 3 sections. So there's 6 lines of music and each section is 2 lines long or 8 measures long. So there's an A section, a B section, and a C section. And so I'll be discussing them in terms of those sections. And as you're practicing, you're going to want to practice and master one section at a time. So let's talk about the first section. The first section begins with this pattern that has IM and P repeating like this. And it's going to be good for you to practice just that pattern before you get into it. And it's not the most difficult one, but there's a couple of things to think about. One, when we play index and middle, we're actually going to move all 4 of our fingers in like we're making a fist. So all those fingers go in and they all come back out when the thumb plays. The other thing to think about is that as you play index and middle, the thumb gets to the string. When the thumb plays, index and middle get to the string. Those motions are simultaneous. So you're going to want to practice this for just a bit, and every day before you begin country dance, you may want to warm up with that technique. All right, so let's talk about the very beginning. When we play this part, we want to have a nice crescendo, decrescendo. And specifically, the loudest notes that you're going to want to hear are the first pair of notes, A and C, of the second measure. So listen like this. Those dynamics really make a big difference in this piece, so see if you can master that. It's the same thing when we go to the B section. So it's really worthwhile to get that down. Now, look at the 4th measure where we have A, D, D, D. Here we have a very interesting melody and accompaniment going on. So the D's are accompaniment, as they are really throughout this section. But here, you're going to want to make sure that the A and the D ring over those notes. So they connect, they are legato, and should sound just like this. A, D, just on their own. If you can achieve that, that really is going to be how we want that to sound. We don't want it to sound like this. All right, moving on. So when you get to the end of the first section, we're going to talk about the last 3 notes that you play, including a pair of notes. So C, A, G, and G. That's a pretty difficult part in the piece, and you're just going to want to repeat that over and over again. You may want to go slowly. C, A, G, and make sure that that is also legato, no silence. And then get faster as you start to feel confident with it. The key to getting that legato is start to reach for the G even as you're playing A. So instead of really having to jump for it, start moving that finger closer so that when it's time to play, it's just a very slight motion. This is a skill that will serve you well in almost any guitar music that you play. But here's an early example of how it makes a big impact in the sound and difficulty of a part. Same thing when you get to the end of the B section, the second section, where you have E, D, B, and G. That one's a little bit more difficult. And in the version I have, you're supposed to use finger 4 and then finger 3. However, I sometimes recommend my students use finger 3 and then finger 2. that might be just a little bit easier. However, it does involve slightly shifting a bit with your hands. So either one is really okay as long as it's smooth and as long as you can do it consistently. Again, that's another one where you want to practice it slowly and repeatedly until you feel very confident with it. Now, let's talk about the third section, the C section. And at the beginning of this, we have a P-I-M-A arpeggio in the right hand involving all 4 fingers, and we need E on 4th string 2nd fret. So you're going to play that with all 4 fingers starting down on the strings, and then as ring plays, as the A finger plays, you get the thumb back on the string, and as the thumb plays, we get I, M, and A back on the strings. So that's what we would call a block plant, where multiple fingers prepare at the same time. Also, as you play this, be careful not to rush. I hear so many students rush. You know, they just finished the section before, and they're way too fast because their fingers are all prepared, they have good technique, they're ready to go, and then they just rush it and it doesn't sound good. So just be careful. When you don't rush, it's easier. When you don't rush, it sounds better. So just be really careful about that. Get out a metronome if you need to. But that's really it with that section. Now, one other thing I want to talk about here is right after that, where you have the D sharp and then B and F sharp. This is measure 19. And going into measure 20, where you have E, G, and B, really all you're doing is shifting with the index and the ring in the left hand to here. So you might just want to practice this, just doing this over and over again. And then when you play, that's all you're doing is shifting. And you'll do something similar later on that you actually don't shift, but you'll use your middle finger at the very end. These are the last 2 measures. All right, this has been my lesson over Country Dance by Ferdinando Carulli, and you should be ready to go. All right, see you next time.